So hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Cheney. I'm the Yell County Family and Consumer Science Agent. Welcome to session 3 of the estate planning program done by Money Minutes Financial Group. We hope you will enjoy this. And now I'm going to pass it over to Chris to get us started.
We are so glad that you've joined us for another session of our virtual estate planning with the Money Minutes team. We are made up of 7 different family and consumer sciences agents that work with the University of Arkansas system. And the nice thing is we're from all the districts across the state. So we have Mary Jane Cody. She is in Perry County, which is Perryville. We have Pamela Luker, which you'll hear more from a little bit later today. She's from Pope County or Russellville. Katie Cullum, which is in White County, and her city is Searcy. We have Rachel Cheney, which is in Yell County and Danville. Diana Bowen, hers is so easy, it's Lonoke County and Lonoke. And then Crystal Draper in White County, and that, oh my goodness, Crystal Draper is in Hot Spring County in Malvern. And then again, I'm Chris Bolton and I work in Sling County, which is Benton. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to be hearing more, as I mentioned, from Pamela Luker. She is in the Russellville area, and she is newer to Extension, maybe the last couple of years, but she has taught me so much already. So I greatly appreciate Pamela. She is a Family Consumer Sciences agent. She's taught Family Consumer Sciences in the public school system and also worked with the Department of Human Services. So she brings a great wealth of knowledge, and I appreciate that. We also have Jim Bob Humphrey with Humphrey Funeral Home, and he is the second generation funeral family member, and he's also a director, and he is in downtown Russellville, and he has participated in many medical and evangelical, goodness, tongue-tied today, mission trips. So, and he has no plans of retiring. So he wants to keep working. So he enjoys what he does, which is a nice thing. So I am going to turn it over to Pamela, and I'm not sure if she or Mr. Humphrey will go next, but I appreciate y'all both being with us and sharing your expertise.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, so today, we are going to speak on your funeral your way. So I'll get started I'm going to go over some just general tips in funeral planning, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Jim Bob Humphrey, who has even more information and new information related to FEMA since COVID. And so I'm looking forward to even hearing about that from him. So we have some good information, and we have some handouts. So I will get started with some general tips about planning your funeral your way. All right, so I'm going to talk about planning your funeral your way. We'll briefly talk about the funeral rights, funeral fees, and calculating cost, all of which Mr. Humphrey will touch on as he goes through today, and answers questions and provides some more detailed information. So funeral planning tips. Thinking ahead can help you make informed and thoughtful decisions about funeral arrangements. It allows you to choose the specific items you want and need. And it helps you be able to compare prices offered by several funeral providers. So we have a checklist as well that we'll provide you today that you can use in the future whenever you do start your funeral planning. And if you funeral plan ahead, it spares your survivors the stress of making these decisions under the pressure of time and strong emotions. So you can make arrangements directly with a funeral establishment. You do want to consider when planning a funeral pre-need where your remains will be buried. You want to consider, do you want to be the embalmment, or do you want your ashes scattered? In the short time between death and burial of a loved one, many family members find themselves just rushing around to buy a cemetery plot or a grave, and often without prayerful thought or a personal visit to the actual site. So that's why it's in the family's best interest to buy things like cemetery plots before you actually need them. So you may wish to make decisions about your arrangements in advance, but not pay for them in advance. There are some reasons behind that you may choose not to, but keep in mind that over time prices may go up and down. Businesses may close or change ownership. So these are all things that we'll need to be thinking about. You want to put your preferences in writing, and you want to give copies to family members and your attorney. You even want to keep one in a handy place. So don't designate your preferences in your will, because a will is often not found or read until after the funeral. And avoid putting the only copy of your preferences in a safe deposit box, because some people have done that. And the reason we don't want to do that is because family may have to make arrangements on a weekend or on a holiday before they can actually get that box open. So think about those things. As far as prepaying, millions of Americans have entered into contracts to arrange their funerals and prepay some or all of their expenses involved. So laws of individual states govern the prepayment of funeral goods and services, but protections vary widely from state to state. So what may be a law here in Arkansas may be different in another state. So you have to think about that. Also, just because you live here, you may want to be buried somewhere else, maybe around a family plot. So these are all things that you need to consider. Also, if you're thinking about prepaying for goods and services, it's important to consider these issues before putting down any money. So some of those things are, what are you actually paying for? Are you buying only merchandise like a casket and vault, or are you purchasing funeral services as well? And what happens to that money when you've prepaid? States have different requirements for handling funds paid for prearranged funeral services. What happens to the interest income on money that's prepaid that's put into a trust account? Are you protected if the firm that you dealt with goes out of business? Can you cancel the contract and get a full refund if you change your mind? And what happens if you move to a different area or die away from home? Some prepaid funeral plans can be transferred, but often with an added cost. So you need to make sure that you're asking yourself these questions. And Rachel, if you will put in the chat our checklist that has some things that you need to consider when you are planning your own funeral. This list, and we will send you an email as well that has the list to go along with it. Now, what I'm going to do, I know there's new laws that have come up and new things you can do with that FEMA is currently has approved. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Jim Bob Humphreys, who's going to give us some more details on answering some of those questions that I said you need to ask yourself, and also give us some updated information about things going on right now in funeral planning.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So my name is Jim Bob Humphrey. I'm with Humphrey Funeral Service. I'm a second generation funeral director. My father was in the business for 56 years. This is my 42nd year in this industry. And my son, James Humphrey, has been in the industry now for 12 years. So we're a 3-generation organization, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I want to thank you, Pam, for your introductory comments. They are spot on, well organized, and well thought out. And what I would like to do is simply delve into the details of that just a little bit more of what you've already said. So let's begin with my father, my personal hero, adopted me when I was 7 years old, and I came to live in an old two-story style funeral home in the upstairs apartment over that. And my friends would come over and play, but they never spent the night. But my father gave me and families good advice. He said, in order to plan a funeral, you need two things: a plan. In order to have a funeral, you need a plan and the funds to pay for it. And so, pretty simple, plan comes first. There are people today whom I encounter who have more than adequate funds to pay for their funeral, but they've not done any planning. By planning, I mean they haven't discussed, they haven't thought through their wishes, and they haven't, even if they have wishes, have sometimes not discussed those wishes with immediate family members. That's the core of pre-planning, or having any type of plan, is to sit down with your family members and express what your desires are. It's important on the one hand, while we want to remember that the funeral is for the family, it's also, though, on the other hand, it is for their benefit, if you will, to encourage them, but it's also should be reflective of what your life and your beliefs and the things that you want to share in terms of your legacy. So let's start with the very first decision that you want to make in your plan. Do I want to be buried, or do I want to be cremated? That is the first thing that the funeral home will want to know. And it's the first thing that you'll want to be sure and communicate with your family members. This is particularly important right now. You see, we're in our nation, we are in the first generation, or what I would call the transitional generation, from burial to cremation. Burial, when I first started in funeral service 42 years ago, was in our immediate area, 99%. Only 1% of people were buried. Now, I'm talking about like in Arkansas. Today, we are more in the range of 40%, 4 or 50%. It's a little bit difficult to say exactly because of the number of people who have pre-planned some years ago. But for current deaths that have not pre-planned, I think we're looking at probably close to 50 or 60%. Nationwide, it's up in the 70% area, and it tends to be more people, a higher level of cremation in areas that are metropolitan. Now, so here's a reason that it's really important to discuss this with your family. If your family has always had burials and now you want to have a cremation, you need to talk about that. Because at the time of your death, the documents that will be necessary to complete that cremation are those that will need to be signed by your legal next of kin. Suppose that you want to be cremated, but your children really don't like the idea, or your spouse doesn't. It will create difficulty and conflict inside the family, and also difficulty for the funeral home. The state of Arkansas, the funeral directors in Arkansas, about 10 years ago, passed a law called the Declaration of Disposition Law. And so it's a statute in Arkansas that says that you can go to the funeral home and you can pick up a copy of this, or you can download it off the web. Declaration of Disposition, State of Arkansas. It's a one-page form. And you simply say, I, Jim Bob Humphrey, on this date, being of sound mind, for the most part, do hereby certify and declare that I wish to be cremated at the time of my death. I hereby appoint Humphrey Funeral Service, Shin Funeral Service, Gardner, again, whoever your funeral home is, Limley Funeral Service, to carry out those wishes in conjunction with, and then you can name a person. So you may have 3 children, but your faithful daughter lives here, and she's the one who is really going to be has taken care of helping you with details. And so that's helpful. Now, that doesn't mean that the other children are cut out. It simply means that this is a person that the funeral home can work with in executing the details of your plan. But it is important to know that without that declaration of disposition, if you have 3 children, the funeral home is going to want all 3 of those children to sign. If you're married, you have a spouse, then the spouse will need to sign as long as he or she is still competent. This is where it becomes important to do, as you pre-plan your service, it's also important to plan all of your final transition from this life to the next plans. What I mean is that includes a power of attorney, a simple will, and a medical directive. So I have a power of attorney. My wife is my primary power of attorney. In the event that she's not available, if I'm incapacitated, then my daughter or son become the substitute power of attorney. So that's important. But remember also that powers of attorney cease at the moment of death. And so what takes over then? Most people would like to say the estate, but frankly, estates are not, most people don't even have an estate. And estates are not probated for a very long time. So what really takes over then is the immediate next of kin. Now, I'm about to share something with you. It may sound strange, but this is the law. When you die, or when I die, my body becomes legal property. Yeah, that's right. Legal property. Doesn't belong to the funeral home or the state of Arkansas or the county coroner. It belongs to your legal next of kin. So at the time of my death, my body will belong to my wife. I think she likes that idea. And so she has then what is called right of disposition. So she is going to contact a funeral home that she trusts, and I know one, that will carry out her wishes, or she'll carry out my wishes. Now, that's pretty straightforward. But let's suppose that this person who died is in the middle of a divorce, but the divorce hasn't been finalized. It was an ugly divorce. Well, guess what? That wife is still in charge. That can be very difficult for the family. Well, let's suppose that we have 3 children and there's no spouse, but one of the children is estranged. And while that's difficult to think about, it's not uncommon. The funeral home will then be essentially, again, we're talking about without this declaration of disposition or a prepaid funeral plan, the funeral home is going to have a delay. They're going to delay your services, carrying them out, your wishes possibly, in order to spend some time trying to contact that estranged child. That's not good for any family members. So that's the reason that this pre-planning is really essential. Now, I hope that your family structure is such that you don't have any of those problems, but we have to deal with realities. So decide, am I going to be cremated or am I going to be buried? And then discuss it with your family. That includes your spouse and your children. Your children may not like this at first. They may think that, oh, Mom, we don't need to talk about that because after all, you're not going to die. Well, I only know 2 people who didn't die. That's a whole biblical thing. Anyway, so let's go on. So it's important to have that discussion. Once you have that discussion, you now have a plan. The next thing I recommend that you do is go to the funeral home and document that plan. You don't have to pay for it. Just go to the funeral home and say, do you have some pieces of paper that I can write down my instructions on? Choose a funeral home that you trust. This is a company that has been established for some years, is well spoken of in the community. You've watched some of their services and they have a good reputation. And of course, take into account pricing. So ask them for a general price list, ask them for a set of forms. It's usually 3 or 4 pages that you can take home, fill out with your spouse, take those back to the funeral home for their files. This is not a contract. You're just recording your wishes as of a given day. This is what I think I would like to happen. Now, let's say you do that when you're 55 or 60. Then some more years go by and we begin to recognize that perhaps, I'm not going to live to be 105 and I need to go ahead and actually put this down in specific. So go back to the funeral home, same one, I hope, if I still like them. If they're maybe have changed management or things aren't as well as they used to be, pick a different funeral home, look at their pricing. Don't feel obligated to sign a deal when you walk in there, and certainly not if they send a representative to your home. Think about it. That decision can wait a few days after you've really had time to really think about it. There are some laws that say you got 3 days to revoke a deal, but it's better just to get some information and then think about it. So, but you go there and you say, okay, I want to be buried and I want a service at my church. If I live to be, where I'm still kind of pretty well known. But then on the other hand, if it's where my friends have outlived me, then maybe just have a chapel service. And then if it reaches the point where I'm so old that all of my friends are gone and I just am not really known anymore, let's just have a simple graveside service. Funeral home will record those wishes. You'll go in and pick a casket, perhaps an outer container that's a vault Body goes in the casket. Casket goes in the vault. Outer container. Vault goes in the ground. Required by state law? No. On this outer container. Good idea? Absolutely. Because if you have a concrete box, let's say you got a concrete box here. Here it is. Down the ground. Right here above it, there's about 8,000 pounds of dirt on top of that. See, all that dirt. And it will collapse that grade if there's not a container holding it. So perpetual care cemeteries are going to require it. Polk County has 270 cemeteries. Isn't that staggering? There's a reason for that, but that's a different discussion. So, and we only have two or three really perpetual care cemeteries that require an outer container. It's a good idea. You can buy one as inexpensively as a few $100s. That's a concrete box. So now you've planned, then you have written down your plan, and some more years have gone by, and you have more like finalized your plan. And now you say to the funeral director, okay, how much does all that cost? And he says, well, your chapel service and your casket and your vault, everything you want is going to be about, say, $8,000. And you say, okay, I want to pay for that. What are my options in paying for that? And he says, well, you can pay for it in full, or you can make monthly payments on it. And you say, well, I want to make monthly payments of, say, $200, which is going to go about 2 years. So that's not an unreasonable thing. Some people, perhaps they want to, again, we're on burial now, not cremation. And they'll set that up for you on 48 months. The next question you need to ask, and before you sign this deal, is where does the money go? And this is something that Pam was mentioning earlier. There are two ways to do this. It can go into a local bank trust, or it can go into an insurance company. My company uses the insurance company route because we use an annuity. An annuity policy is simply a savings account inside a life insurance company. It tends to be much more portable. And this is my opinion. Others would disagree with me, perhaps, but I believe it's more secure. I've 42 years of reasons from having seen things that happened that were regrettable in our industry, with practitioners not being ethical, and we're nearly all at bank trusts, frankly. Well, everyone I can think of except for one. And there have been probably 30 or 40 of those in Arkansas. That's another thing. Do your due diligence. That includes if you purchase a prepaid funeral in 2021 and 10 years goes by and you begin to hear things about this funeral home that just don't sound very good, or you see their services are not going well, ask around, ask your minister, ask other people who go to funerals quite a bit. And if things are not going well at that funeral home, consider transferring it. You certainly can. So I think that's enough about the burial side. Maybe we'll just take a break right here. Pam, do you want to jump in and see if what track we're on here? Is our track going well? Are there things that you think of that you would like to ask?
I think that the track's going well. That's great information right along the lines of what I think people were requesting. So what I'm going to do is, before you move on, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. So if any questions up to this point, please go ahead and either put it in the chat, or feel free to unmute or raise your hand on here. So we'll give them a little bit to see if anyone has any additional questions.
I want to mention, if you missed it, inside the chat, Pamela shared the Arkansas right of disposition, and I glanced on it, and I have to confess I've already made 3 copies, and it wasn't just for cremation, it's for however you would like to have your body taken care of. So it is all inclusive with that document from what I read.
That's exactly correct. And I didn't mean to misstate that. It's simply especially important with cremation, because if it's a burial, you're not going to have to, the funeral director is not going to require some kind of a document in the event that all the family members are not available. In the event that it's cremation, it's because cremation is an irreversible process. That is why it's a good idea. Do it either way, but especially for cremation. That would be my advice. So let's talk about cremation a bit. I've spent a lot of time over the last 7 or 8 years investigating cremation practices in North America. And frankly, I'm not very happy with my colleagues. I'm going to be real transparent here, and I may get some pushback from some colleagues, and I'm perfectly willing to discuss any of these issues with them. I was so challenged about some of these practices that I actually went to Quebec and visited a colleague there who had opened his a new cremation center. And I saw a different perspective, a different approach. And then I actually studied cremation practices in Germany, Belgium, and in London and throughout Western Europe. And so you might wonder, well, why would you do that? You know, in North America, we tend to think that we are pretty much the best at everything. We certainly have the best space program. But let me share with you that the nation of Germany has the toughest laws regarding cremation practices of any advanced country in the world. Now, if you're over 60 or 65, you probably know why. Anybody want to ledge a guess about why would Germany have the most restrictive and just very strict laws regarding cremation practices? Jump in there. Historians? Yes. World War II, Auschwitz, Dachau. So it was so horrific, those practices were, it shocked the world to the point that in the Nuremberg trials, when all those war criminals from Germany were on trial, it was as if the nation of Germany, the civilian population, in a sense, as if they were on trial, because frankly, they knew about this. You read history. The civilian population knew what was going on. Well, therefore, when Germany was being rebuilt, their country passed strict laws regarding cremation and the handling and the transparency of it for the availability of the body to be viewed, for the family to know exactly what was happening, for the family to be a part of what was happening. And not only that, they built amazing facilities for it. It is not unusual for a new crematorium facility in Germany to cost $10 million and have 3 or 4 chapels, beautiful dining spaces, the highest level of technology for cremation, complete transparency with the family, including the body has been bathed and disinfected, not embalmed, has been dressed and casketed, not in an expensive casket, but in something that's dignified, suitable for viewing. And then the family is allowed to be there as a part of, to watch the cremation if they want to, don't have to. Let me clarify that for you. It's interesting to me to note that cremation, essentially in the process, is the body and or casket is introduced to temperature of 1600 degrees for 2 hours. And in that time period, now here's an old test question, the body is reduced to what? Type in your answer. The body is reduced to, okay, that would be the answer that 99.9% of people would give, and it is the label we use. So your term is correct. You said ashes. It's correct in the sense that we use it. It is not correct in the sense of it being true or accurate. It's a misnomer. The body is reduced to bones. Funeral homes have been hesitant to use that term, regrettably, in my opinion, because it is, first of all, the truth. There is no ethereal ashes. These are your loved one's bones that are returned to the family. And that's the reason that they should be placed in a dignified container and handled in a dignified way. Let me give you a little, we all have epiphanies, moments that are, wow, I never thought of it. 10 years ago, an elderly gentleman moved here from Chicago, very comfortable with cremation. His spouse died, hadn't been here too long, decided not to have a service, but did have cremation, and selected a nice urn, which we put his loved one's ashes, actually bones, into the urn. And then he came by a few days later and picked up the urn. And being somewhat upset as he came back into the funeral home, which is not unusual, I asked if I might carry the urn out to his car with him. And he said, yes, that would be very nice. So we walked together. And here's what happened. We went around to the passenger door, I kind of thought he would use the trunk, but no. He opened the passenger door. He asked me for the urn. He placed the urn in the passenger seat. And guess what he did next? Yeah, that's right, Pam. He buckled the seatbelt. And I thought to myself, wow, this is an important moment for me. This moment informs my career in a better way than it's been informed in the past. That's really important. And I can't overstate its importance. This is something that I feel so strongly about that it has led to conflict between myself and colleagues. Because in North America, the standard practice is that the body is not bathed or disinfected, that after removal is taken to a cooler that may not in fact be on site at the funeral home. In fact, typically is not. Oftentimes a county coroner's cooler or a county morgue. And then the body is brought to the funeral home and is oftentimes placed just wrapped in a sheet, typically, and then placed in a cardboard box. And then that's taken to a low-end contractor, or let's just say a contractor. Look, this is uncomfortable, okay? This is uncomfortable for me because this is what has been done for a long time. Now, I am not talking about Noble, Georgia, or the thing that happened in Little Rock. I'm not talking about that. I'm simply saying that the normal procedure is not transparent to the family. And perhaps some families wouldn't object to it, but I think others would. And so what I'm suggesting is to my colleagues is that it is time for funeral homes everywhere to raise their standard. And you need to know as a consumer, you need to ask the question, will my mother's body be bathed and disinfected? And if they say, well, if you really want that, yeah, we'll do that, but we don't want to do that. And if you say, I'd like for my mother to be dressed in some clothing, doesn't mean anything fancy, then you may get a response of, well, we don't usually do that. It's not required. Well, who cares if it's required? Required by who? This is a matter of dignity. And then will I be able to see my mom's body after this? Can we have just a private family viewing for a few moments? And these are the things that are done as a matter of course in Europe. And they need to be done as a matter of course in North America. And you may remember some years ago that I had some considerable pushback about building a crematory here in this area. We have since then built that crematory cremation center at our funeral home. We have enclosed about 1,500 square feet for both our cremation center and some dining space, and really to accommodate this new approach to disposition. So, you may remember there's a lot of stuff in the paper, but I had a lot more pushback from my colleagues in the industry than I did from the public. So a lot of my colleagues were not happy that I was trying to raise the bar. I know it sounds like I'm trying to pat myself on the back. I'm not, because I feel some guilt that for a number of years out of ignorance, I didn't know that we should be doing this higher level. I should have known, but these are practices that were essentially inherited, if you will, through the industry. So I've been very frank with you about that. And I would like to maybe open up to any questions that you might have.
You have one question that was prior to that discussion. Feel free, anyone that has questions related to some of the recent information Mr. Humphrey's provided, to ask. I would like to go back before we go further. And we had one question that said, if you prepay for your plot vault services, can they be seized as an asset if you should apply for disability?
No. That's a great question. And I'll answer this next question in just a moment. So if you prepay your arrangements, you will be given the opportunity in Arkansas to designate that this contract is revocable or irrevocable. You should always select irrevocable. Unless you have $50 million in the bank and money is never going to be a problem for you with a nursing home, you should select irrevocable. That simply means that the funds, let's say I paid the funeral homes under $8,000 in total to carry out my services for my burial. So when you put irrevocable on that, the Department of Human Services administers Medicare, Medicaid, is going to say that's not an asset. That $8,000 is not an asset to you as an individual in determining your eligibility to be on Medicaid or to receive SSI. This is really important. About half or maybe 2/3 of the prepaid contracts that I will do this year are individuals who are going to be going into the nursing home or who are preparing to be on SSI assistance. And it's critical that those prepaid contracts be marked irrevocable so that they cannot be seized in essence. Now, there's a more complex issue that enters into this, and it's life insurance. I wish that our life insurance laws, not the law, I wish the laws regarding SSI could be changed about life insurance. So here's the issue. I have a whole life policy. It's $20,000. I bought it when I was 50 years old. Yes, I know what you're talking about. Okay, we'll get to that. So a $20,000 policy, let's say I bought it. This is a fictitious person. I bought this because I did not want my children to be burdened by my funeral expense. I have it with, MetLife or Globe or whoever. And over the years that I've had it, it has accumulated a cash surrender value of $7,500. That's a real problem. When you go to prepay your funeral, when you go to apply for benefits under Medicaid, SSI, you can only have assets totaling about $2,400, maybe $2,200, but anyway, let's just call it $2,400. That's cash. And there's a lot more to that my friends here can tell you about that. But that $5,000 or $7,500 cash surrender value interferes with that. And you must do what's called a spin down. So it means simply that basically that policy has to be surrendered. Well, you surrender a $20,000 life insurance policy for $5,000, you've lost $15,000, and that doesn't seem very good and fair, but that's the law. Work with your funeral director on this. There are some circumstances under which you might be able to make the funeral home the beneficiary of that policy, but even then, I strongly do not recommend that procedure. Why? Because someone's going to have to continue to pay the premiums on that policy. And I've dealt with this for a long time. It's complicated, but you need to surrender the policy. Remember that you won't be paying the premiums on it anymore. So surrender the policy and at $5,000, then take the premiums and make payments on the rest of the funeral. That is my advice, and please do that. Now, we had a couple of questions that have gone off my screen. One was, are you required to be embalmed? I think I saw that. So here's really the simple answer to that. If you are going to have a public viewing, your body will need to be embalmed. By public viewing, I'm not talking about private, short viewing for your family. I'm talking about visitation. Yes, the body will be required to be embalmed. That's health department law and funeral home policies. That's the short answer. Now, with a burial, though, you can arrange a burial that is what is often called a direct burial. That simply means, yes, I want a casket, and yes, I want to be buried in a cemetery, but I don't want any viewing, and I really don't like the idea of embalming. So put my body in a cooler for the 2 or 3 days that are necessary for the family to make these arrangements, and the family to get here. And then, say if the service is at 2:00 in the afternoon, the funeral home will dress the body that morning, place it in a casket. The casket is closed, take it to the cemetery, and have your graveside service. That's doable. That's embalming, but with no embalming, but with burial. Cremation is embalming required for cremation? Well, absolutely not. So, however, there are families who would like to have a service with viewing and still have cremation as final disposition. Remember that cremation is not a type of funeral. It's a type of disposition. Burial, cremation, disposition, or burial at sea, or donation of the body. Those are types of disposition. Those are not types of services. It seemed like there was another question.
I saw another question that was related. which you kind of covered, but if you want to add something, I'm going to give you the opportunity, that says, when my mother-in-law was in the nursing home, if money accumulated in her account over the nursing home charges, insurance, etc., we were allowed to prepay on her funeral.
You said she was allowed to do that? Is that yes?
That's what the comment
Yes.
said. Yeah.
So here's a way to handle that. So let's say that we're getting ready to put mom in the nursing home and she's got $5,000 in a checking account. You spend the $2,600, so you only have the $2,400 in there, and you can break your funeral into its pieces. The funeral home will tell you, here's how much the casket costs. Casket is $1,900. Here's how much the vault costs, $1,500. Here's how much our service fee is, $4,500. You can prepay any piece of that. You just want to make sure that you have a very good description in the contract from the funeral home of what it is you've purchased. If you only purchase your casket, it should say, I just purchased a Aurora, that's the company name, or Batesville, company name, 18 gauge steel, that's the type, or hardwood, pink with a pink interior casket. So you've got a descriptor. Or I purchased basic services, director and staff, embalming, and facilities and equipment. That's pretty much your service, and hearse and flower car too. So you get those itemized. And then, so you've got part of your funeral paid for. Now you accumulate in your cash account, goes from 2,300 to 24, 25, 26. The nursing home says, hey, need to spend down, go to the funeral home, take that few $100s, pay that, or even set it up $25 per month. Yes. And here's another item. Let's say you want to prepay everything about your funeral. I mean, everything, even the things that you want. There are many people who really want to take care of everything. So they go to the funeral home and they pay their casket, their service fee, and their vault. Now we have a law that allows you, and I was involved in helping get this law in the books in '96, that allows you to prepay cash advances. And those can be substantial in the funeral business. That can be digging the grave, $800, sales tax, $200, death certificates, $50, an obituary can be $150. So you can easily have $1,200 or $1,500 or even $2,000 in cash advances. You can prepay those. Those prices just won't be guaranteed as to price, but the casket service fee involved will. Now, the question that was just asked, if I prepay my service and the funeral home goes broke, goes bankrupt, can I get my money back? When a funeral home goes broke, you have one of two situations. They went broke under dishonest circumstances, meaning that the owner embezzled money, prepaid, which could be in the form of he never even put the money in the bank. We actually had that in this marketplace some years ago. Or the money was put into a bank and then it was somehow withdrawn illegally. So the money's gone in those cases. In 1996, when I helped work with some other colleagues in the industry, some of our lawmakers, to restructure the laws in the state of Arkansas regarding prepaid funerals, we set up what was called a guarantee fund. Prepaid funerals are regulated by the Arkansas Insurance Department, and man, they are tough. I mean, tough regulators, and that's good. I'm audited every year. My insurance company is audited every year. Every penny's got to be accounted for. It's exactly how it should be. But we also set up a provision called a guarantee fund. Every time a prepaid funeral is sold in the state of Arkansas, the funeral home must send $10 to the insurance department. That money is put into the guarantee fund, which has a balance right now exceeding, I think, $2 million. In fact, I'm on the board for overseeing that, when we had a problem. So yes, that money will be replaced. There'll have to be a substitute provider. So, but that's no problem. In your community, you pick another funeral home. The money is reimbursed to the trust, and the funeral home will typically discount their prices to accommodate or match that price, that contract, at least to the best of their ability. That was not true about 25 years ago. It is now. I'm glad. That's a good thing. So we talked about cremation. We talked about burial. We talked about pre-planning. Let's talk just briefly. I'm not an attorney, but I did spend the night at a Holiday Inn Express. And so I'd like to just say, I know that's old commercial, but I'd just like to say, remember again, power of attorney, really important, because decisions have to be made. And look, the word durable power of attorney A power of attorney should always be durable, but that doesn't mean it lasts till after I die. It simply means that if I'm not able to communicate, like I'm in a comatose state, that you can act for me. And when you give somebody your power of attorney, be careful. You can give them a limited power of attorney, or you can give them a complete power of attorney. Complete power of attorney literally means they can sell your house, they can take all the money out of the bank. You better really trust this person. So power of attorney, that allows them to even make a prearranged contract funeral for you when you're unable to do those things for yourself. Okay, looks like we might have some photos coming out. So power of attorney, medical directive. Your medical directive is your power of attorney specifically related to your medical issues. You might have, your daughter is really good with numbers and you really trust her with all that stuff. So you give her your financial power of attorney, and your son is super compassionate and would not unplug your ventilator if you got the flu. So give him your medical directive. And then also a real simple will. These things can be done online through, you can certainly go see your local attorney for a few $100s. He'll execute basic things like this. And that's a good idea. It will help you and it will help your family. Now I saw a question I thought, or a link. I think we're going to get some photos maybe. Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So we're going to unlock the phone here and we're going to see some photos that I have on the phone that Katie, my assistant here, who's very sharp, is going to be able to pull up some photos for us that we're going to take a look at that will help you. Yeah, there we go.
While she's doing that, do you think you can touch a little bit on the new FEMA information for me?
Yes, this is actually really incredible. This just came on board about 60 days ago. FEMA has been given money by the United States Congress to reimburse funeral expenses for individuals who have died of COVID or COVID-related death. It's a very simple process. I'm going to give you the phone number in a little while. It's an 800 number. You call FEMA. Now, obviously, I'm kind of bragging here, showing them some things at my funeral. That's our chapel. This is our cemetery that we're planning. So regarding FEMA, if your loved one, or let's say you have a very close friend and her mother died of COVID, that is, she had COVID and went to the hospital and then died sometime later, if the doctor put on the death certificate that she died of pneumonia, but due to or consequence of COVID, or COVID was a contributing factor, you only have to have a death certificate. And then you must have a contract from the funeral home, and it's signed. And then you can have a contract from the cemetery, for example. So FEMA will reimburse up to $9,000 of your funeral expense. I was astounded when this first came on. We did some training. Our directors have been trained on this via a thing we're doing now, live training, what do we call it? Live screencast. I don't remember what this is called. You know what I'm talking about, what we're doing right now. It's not a timeshare, whatever. What? Zoom. Yeah, we're doing a Zoom thing. Thank you. Katie told me it was a Zoom. So we're Zooming. So we did a Zoom session with FEMA and we learned exactly how to do this. A phone number is, you need to write this down, even if you didn't happen to you, and I hope it didn't in your family, but a friend. Contact FEMA, 844-684-6333. You can also use the Google, but 844-684-6333. If you're uncertain about this, just call me or one of my staff at the funeral home. You can also call the funeral home that you used. I've been a little surprised to see that some of my colleagues around the state have not been as interested in doing this as I thought they would be. We've contacted all of our families where there's a COVID-related death and are currently helping about 30 or 40 families with this. The money's available. Why shouldn't they receive it? The COVID deaths were terrible. They were horrible. I don't want to, just the idea that those people died alone and the difficulty, the suffering their families went through, both during that time of sickness for their loved one and then being really deprived of having the normal things that we would normally have available as services, options. So this is a good thing. Whether you agree with it politically or not doesn't matter. So, help people get these funds. And it will not only pay for the funeral homes charges, it will pay for the cemetery charges and open and closing the grave and flowers and even pay the minister something. So, hey, that's a good thing. Let's see here. What else about that? Oh, so you'll need a death certificate and a contract. Then you call this phone number, and FEMA, you may have a wait, of course, and then FEMA will give you a number, a case number. Then, if you're tech savvy, go to their website and upload your forms. If you're not, your granddaughter will do it for you. And then if you have some challenges, then just call me, Jim Bob Humphrey, 479-264-1427. That's my personal cell, 264-1427, or call my office, 479-968-4411, and we will help you, and we'll be glad to help you with it. Teresa Holland is our office manager. She's been doing most of these, and it's not difficult. And so, yeah, get that money and put it in savings, and prepay your funeral. Yeah, and I bet you've got this. Got that link on there, and I bet if you go to FEMA's website, you can specifically get the specific link for just the funeral reimbursement expense here. So those are the primary things I wanted to talk to you about. I got a real simple litmus test for you for a funeral director. And by the way, I know hundreds, if not thousands, of funeral directors all across America who are excellent people. They are they have integrity and they want to help. So just look for people in the industry who they are about honor and dignity. If they're about helping you honor your loved one in a dignified way, those are the people you want to use. And they typically are not primarily concerned with money. They're typically concerned about those items, and then they find that their success follows that. Okay, I'm going to just unabashedly brag here. Our company has invested about $1.6 million in 2 projects over the last several years. Our company has spent about $1.5 million in the last several years to develop first what we call the Dignity Cremation Center. It is actually named after my late father, the J. Herman Humphrey Dignity Cremation Center. And it is, it's impressive. So we have our own retort, that's the cremation unit on site. So we also have our own cooler, which has the capacity of handling up to 10, the remains of 10 decedents. We also have built into that a confirmation viewing chapel just for our cremation families, where the body can be viewed after being placed in. We actually provide a home-built casket. It's made out of birch. Okay, what you're seeing here is our Dignity Cremation Chapel. What you're looking at right there, that piece of device, that piece of equipment, is called a charger. It's simply the stand on which the casket sits. The door that looks to be a stainless steel door, that is the doorway into what's called the retort. That's the crematory itself, the cremator unit. But this is actually a space for the family to have their final viewing. This is our dining space. Now, this is our design criteria. It's actually being built as we speak by Keener Construction Company. And so we want to have a place for our families to come before the service, to have a meal catered, or they can bring the pizza, whatever they want to do. And some of grandma's banana pudding would be helpful, along with chicken dumplings, of which I'm a big fan. And so that's the dining space. We actually, on the floor, I wanted to do something interesting. So we put a compass graphic, and yes, who can tell me what's wrong with it? Yep, you guessed it. East and west are reversed. And that is in stained concrete. So we're working on a fix for that. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. I just don't. So this is the facility prior to having the stain on the concrete. So the one I showed you is our model. This is the actual, and it's going to be a beautiful space. This I'm really proud of. I want to zoom in on this. That's my garage door in black, but that on the left is our cooler. It is clean. It is immaculate clean. I insist on that entire space. This is where our staff works. And I insist on this space being kept perfectly clean at all times. That's another, okay, so on your right, that's the cooler, and on your left is actually what's called the retort. That's the actual cremation unit. Okay, now I'm really, this is only about a minute or two. It might hang a little bit because it's a video. Thank you. You're the best.
Mr. Jim Bob, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
If I am wanting to save for my funeral, and I know things can vary depending on what's chosen, what would be a good starting range for me to put aside to help pay for my?
So again, for cremation with a service, you should plan on about $5,000 or $6,000. Now, cremation is not a service. Cremation is a form of disposition. So the cremation itself, think of it as being sort of like the embalming and grave digging, I guess, in comparison wise. So that's going to be about $2,000 in our market. My company is higher than that. It's because of the investment we've made in our approach to it. And I don't make any apologies for that. So $3,000 for the cremation process itself at my funeral home, and then about $2,000 for your service components. That's a chapel or church service and memory folders and video. So $5,000 is I think is enough. Now, if you're going to go to a cemetery, so now let's talk about the disposition of those ashes, or I used the wrong term, of your loved one's bones. This is my east side of our chapel, and that's those 6 windows is a remodel area, I guess we could say that. This is still a little bit dirty. We'll let you look at the snow scene. That's at my cemetery at Center Valley. But to answer your question, cemetery expense, you're going to add another $1,000 or so, or $1,750. So $7,500 cremation, church or chapel service, and burial at a cemetery. I think $7,500 is adequate. Now, if you're looking at burial, you really do need to be thinking in the $12,000 and $13,000 range, including cremation, your burial service, casket, outer container, cemetery space, and marker. So now, here's a thought. It's a little complicated. Okay, so start young. Young is 50. Start at 50 on planning your funeral. 55, that's great. $25 a month, $50 a month when you're 50. It's just, but start there. Now, if we're talking about grandma, then you need to go down to the funeral home and just tell them, look, grandma has saved, but she's just been by herself for all these years, and she just gets a check every month of $400 from Social Security, and she has managed to save $4,000. And she wants to be buried at Pisgah Cemetery. Just tell them. And I think you'll find they'll work with you. They'll help you. That's just a quick diagram overview of our cemetery lots. This is at Center Valley Memorial Gardens. It will open this spring. It's the first perpetual care cemetery in the state, the newest perpetual care cemetery in the state of Arkansas, the newest one in our region in 50 years. And it is going to be truly magnificent. This land has been in my family 100 years. And I'll just tell you, after 42 years in the funeral industry, I'm tired. And my son is running the company. And I just look forward to being out here and driving the lawn tractor and taking care of my friends and loved ones and the community members' graves. This community has been so good to me. When I was little, my parents were 47 years old when they adopted me, and they didn't know anything about raising little boys. So really the town raised me as much as they did. It just was a great place to grow up in. My school teachers here, the business community, we just rode our bicycle everywhere, and it was just great. So this is a way for me to pay back. Okay, I want you to see this. This is the type of casket that we provide for cremation. Now, in this particular case, and you may know this gentleman, who's very well loved, his sons actually built that casket, which I thought was lovely. And now wait, I said cremation. That is that he was buried, but that is the type of casket that we provide for our cremation families. This is last fall, and that is a flyover view of our main section, section 1. That's about 2 acres just in that center section. This is a diagram of the 3 types of lots we're going to have. It's got a pond. I'm going to put some fish in it. I'm just really excited about that. This was our first burial there, Leela Madison. And I put those poles and stakes around it to make sure during the construction time that her grave was, taken care of. This is what our crown lots will look like, which is really cool. I need a water purifier in that pond. That's about last summer. This is what our veterans section will look like. This is really cool. May 22nd, we're going to have a grand opening, and we have a veteran section that will look exactly like this. This is based on Arlington. And so in this case, each veteran has his own stone. To me, equally important, each spouse of the veteran has their own stone. I am influenced very much by the fact that over the last 20 years, I have come to know hundreds and hundreds of veterans in our area, from the 1st 206 Field Artillery Battalion, the 39th Infantry Brigade, all of our service branches, retirees from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, Enduring Freedom, the Horn of Africa, and the GWAT. If you know what those are, you're going to know. And what I've seen is that when these soldiers, men and women, deploy, the sacrifices made by their spouses are in every bit as significant as the sacrifice made by a soldier, sailor, airman, marine, in some cases more. So I wanted them to have their own marker to commemorate their service. So these are 2 spaces with 2 markers are $3,000, which I think is remarkable. And it is going to be beautiful. There are already 5 markers, 5 barrels there, 2 markers are set. All I need now is that beautiful green grass.
Mr. Humphrey?
Yes, ma'am.
We have a question in the chat. Yes. It says, do most people have a burial when cremated? Since I've only seen cremated remains on television, I thought that they were stored in an urn in the home. Just curious.
And so great question. So when cremation first came along, it seemed that the thing to do was, and this is in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the thing to do was treat them like ethereal dust and sprinkle them in the river or scatter them into the air. And I think that's kind of going away unless somebody was just quite the woodsman or water person. The normal practice that I see is there's either a plan specifically from the beginning to have the remains buried at a cemetery in a family plot. In some cases, it can be a full adult grave. We will allow that at our cemetery. In other cases, it's got to be in a specific area of the cemetery, although I don't think that's very often. But so there's a specific plan to do that, or there's not a plan. And what happens is exactly what you said. The cremains are in an urn. They are kept in the home. That usually lasts about a year to 18 months. And it reaches a point where the person keeping them it's very disturbing. And they want to have them buried and have a marker placed. And I think that's the best thing to do. It does provide a place, memorialization, a place to visit, a place to go. So I think it's very good. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just so impressed with your technology and your Zoom ability. I've never Zoomed so well.
So during your presentation, one of the things you mentioned about your profession made me think about an old saying, the family that always cut the end off the roast. Why did you cut the end off the roast? Because mom did, grandma did, great grandma did. And it was just because the pan was too small. Yeah. So hopefully in your business, as you increase the knowledge and you raise the bar, a new pot will be purchased, and figuratively speaking. So the trends and the practices are given more respect and more transparency, and a lot of food for thought for that. And also your pond, you can go visit your local county extension office, and your ag agent will be able to give you some advice and some consulting. So we do so many things, and we network with so many different groups around the community, and we appreciate you joining us today and helping us spread this information. You have in your chat been given several links to the past videos, but then also the evaluations. So if you will please complete those. This is our last session in our virtual estate planning weekly series. We appreciate you being here. And again, if you complete this evaluation, it helps us know that we're on track. It helps us know that we're providing the correct information that you want and in the format that you need it. So we are very concerned about helping you get the information you need in the format that you need it. So again, this is just a small portion of what the University of Arkansas system provides to our county residents. And we appreciate you joining us for the past 3 weeks. Mr. Humphreys and Pamela, great information. You've given me a lot of food for thought. So I appreciate y'all joining us again. And Rachel, did you have some more comments or thoughts?
No, I just want to say thank you so much again to Mr. Humphreys, as well as to Pam. This was some great information. I think it's very important that you get those funeral plans done. So thank you again, and please fill out those evaluations. We really would love to hear your feedback. And once again, thank you, Mr. Humphreys and Pam.